Alright, I'm back with another video. Today is a rare glasses Paul day because something's wrong in my eye, so I can't put my contacts in. I was going to do a Suicide Squad's video about either how it's doing or a boomerang build or something, but yeah, some things have happened. This is about what is apparently going on over at Xbox, where this started with this idea that Xbox was going to bring Hi-Fi Rush to PlayStation and Switch, which got a few Xbox people unsettled, given that it was their, breakout most awarded game of last year. And then that sort of progressed into, actually, they might bring Sea of Thieves multiplatform too. And everyone was like, okay, well, Hi-Fi Rush is kind of small, and Sea of Thieves is multiplayer, and they want to expand the base. A couple weeks later here, now you're at a point where the rumors, which are pretty well sourced, I would say, at this point, to the point where I don't actually believe they're rumors. It's just something that is happening that Xbox has yet to announce. The idea is they're going to be bringing a lot of games multi-platform, resulting in a big shift of their kind of entire gaming philosophy. And among the biggest that we've heard about are Starfield and Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Starfield obviously already being out and allegedly coming to PlayStation sometime next year. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle having been just recently revealed in a big showcase. And then this raises questions about games like Blade, which are kind of under the Bethesda Arm 2, or not sure what's going on with Microsoft's first-party studios, but these are the two games that are being mentioned the most. And it's kind of insane. Like, everyone is trying to kind of parse this news where there's like a case for it and a case against it. And I personally think it's kind of nuts, honestly. The case for it, like, kind of makes sense. So the idea is that Microsoft, Evie, what are you doing? She's okay, itching her back. Microsoft has lost the console war. And like, this is not a console war type statement. This is something that like Phil Spencer has literally said. And he's like, the Xbox One generation was the worst to lose because everyone was building up their digital libraries, and then we were behind Sony, and we're not going to catch up by Sony just by making, Starfield an 11 out of 10 game, which it was not an 11 out of 10 game, as I think many people would agree, even though, yes, I am one of the people who liked it more than most. So the idea is that Microsoft is just going to essentially stop pretending that they can win the console war and bring their games to as many places as possible. They have literally said they wanted to do this, except everyone sort of assumed this meant, cloud streaming on other devices and, the PC releases they do. It seemed exceedingly unlikely that they would just release games, their big exclusive games, on PlayStation. The argument for the consumer is that great news for everyone. Like, oh, you can play your games on Xbox if you want, but if you're a PlayStation player, you're not excluded anymore. So more openness is fantastic. And sure, for some people, but the case against this, there's some like business things to it, and then there's some like player-based things to it. This to me sort of would represent the end of Xbox as the entity we currently know. It would shift Xbox into more or less being a third-party publisher that also has some level of hardware, even though this would do nothing but further decrease sales of Xbox hardware to the point where it would be genuinely hard to make the argument of like, why would you own an Xbox at all if you can buy a PlayStation and get both PlayStation exclusives and Xbox exclusives instead of just Xbox exclusives. And we're going from, well, you already don't really need an Xbox if you have like a good enough gaming PC to run the Xbox Game Pass games. But this would just, it's essentially just waving the white flag and being like, okay, this console thing isn't happening. And like, yeah, you can still buy one if you want, but like, can't really make a good reason for it other than, ease of use for day one Game Pass releases on your TV or something, like a pretty specific context. I also don't see how this helps their overall ambition of expanding Game Pass. The idea is that they want, okay, we're not going to rely on console sales. We're going to do Game Pass. We want everyone to be in Game Pass, and we want, Game Pass to be Netflix of gaming and blah, blah, blah. But this Sony thing, at least in this current form, is not doing that. It's not, at least the rumor is not like Game Pass coming to Sony, which I don't even know how that would work, because if you have Game Pass on PlayStation, are you doing day one Game Pass launches on Xbox, but not day one Game Pass launches on PlayStation? I don't understand that. But like, okay, so it's not Game Pass. It's just we're gonna sell Starfield for $70 on PlayStation and Indiana Jones or whatever. And like it's on a delay. Clearly, it's probably going to be a year delay for PlayStation, but that doesn't do anything to drive Game Pass sales. Like it used to be, if Game Pass is the only real place that these things are launching and it's on the cloud and PC or whatever, that's one thing. But if it's on PlayStation, I mean, if we're trying to convince people to stay in the Xbox ecosystem, it's like, why? And then it just becomes just another third-party game, like, a million other third-party games. So I don't see how this furthers their aim of expanding Game Pass. And then there's sort of like the more personal side of this, where they did this whole thing where the idea was like, they very much said that, we understand that our exclusives are generally lacking compared to Sony and Nintendo, and we're going to change that. We understand this is a problem. We're really going to invest in big new games with our first party studios. The first one of that was like Halo Infinite, but then there's Fable and Avowed and Perfect Dark, and you can argue how those are shaping up, but they made this big pitch that like these acquisitions were all about like we're going to deliver these great first party games to Xbox players. Except the idea of an Xbox player is like sort of ceasing to exist if they start doing this. And they've done this thing where they've cultivated, an Xbox community for years and years. And that has created a bunch of loyal people where they're sold on the idea that, okay, I really like Halo. I really, want to play Starfield, so I'm going to buy Xbox over PlayStation. And, this creates often like annoying console war tribes, but it's like, you've also built up a very loyal player base. And that loyal player base now feels sort of betrayed if you sold them this bill of goods and now it's like, actually, you could just buy the other console and it's fine, like whatever. And I don't know if like this idea of, we're going to squeeze a couple million more sales out of Starfield is worth essentially dismantling your community, because there aren't like that many, communities that have been built up to be as, let's say, passionate as an Xbox community. And there's a lot of, going forward, there would just be so much distrust, because one of the theories here is that, okay, so since Activision Blizzard games are pretty much going to stay multi-platform, allegedly, maybe Bethesda games are going to do that too now. So because the games in question here are Starfield, which is from Bethesda itself, and then Machine Games, Indiana Jones, which is also under the ZeniMax Bethesda arm. So if those are the two big games, maybe it's still like, oh, well, future Halo games and Fable and maybe Avowed and Perfect Dark or whatever are going to stay actually Xbox exclusive. But like, can you trust that? Like there's even rumors that like Halo the Master Chief Collection is one of the games on the list to go to PlayStation, or maybe even Halo Infinite multiplayer by itself is free to play. And like, the point is like, how could you trust Microsoft to actually deliver any exclusives after this, and then either have that actually launch as exclusive or have them change their mind later? Without question, they have said over and over and over again that like Starfield was their big exclusive. It was going to be the start of like this new era of Xbox. And what this says to me is it really implies weakness in both how Starfield did, how they think Indiana Jones will do, and the entire model of the Xbox ecosystem, that like they think Game Pass is sustainable, like we don't care about box sales of games, blah blah blah. But this, I'm not inclined to believe that, oh, we just want to spread the love and joy of Xbox games everywhere. Like, no, you're doing this because you want more money from Starfield sales, or you want more people to buy Indiana Jones when it comes out. Like, that's the reason. And to me, that just undercuts the entire argument you've been making with Game Pass, the entire argument you made to fans that you were going to build up all these exclusives and Xbox was going to rival Nintendo and PlayStation and all these things that you were really leaning into. And now it's just sort of, we give up, it's over. Again, this is not official, and it is all the sourcing I've seen, it's like actually good sourcing, like the exact list of games this is supposedly happening with, because it sort of keeps changing, but like the big ones that stand out are Starfield and Indiana Jones. And like once this is announced, like the other problem is like the narrative is just spinning away from Microsoft at this point. There are rumors that like this is actually happening because people within Microsoft leaked this idea because there was some sort of internal debate of whether they should even do this or not. And like I don't know who's on which side. It feels like for a long time Bethesda did not want their games to be locked to Xbox because they thought it would limit players. But then Microsoft is like, no, you're locked to Xbox. Sorry, but maybe Bethesda pushed hard enough, and they're like, look, man, like barely anyone bought Starfield, and like, yeah, we got players on Game Pass, and it was a quote big launch, but like this game would have done a lot better if it also launched on PlayStation, even if it was a day one like free Game Pass launch. Like, who knows how many copies Starfield could have sold at least at launch on PlayStation. And now that Starfield is a year old and it wasn't like this super amazingly received game, like it was fine, but now it'll get certainly less sales on PlayStation being this old and having, you know, the narrative sort of already shaped around it, when it probably, you know, how many, 10 million sales, 50 million sales, who knows what that would have sold, you know, on PlayStation at actual launch. And now the plan might be to do that with Bethesda games. Like, we don't know if Indiana Jones does this, would it be a year delay for that, or would they just straight up launch it on PlayStation alongside the Game Pass launch? Who knows? It doesn't even feel like Microsoft really knows what they're doing here. Like, this to me seems like Satya Nadella being like, why are we locking games to Xbox? That's crazy. Like, we want as many people as possible, you know, using xCloud and Game Pass. And like, that might apply for like some areas of the industry. Like, I just don't think that's going to pan out how they think for this, because you just become a third-party publisher, but also you're trying to get people to sign up for a subscription, but also you're kind of still trying to sell hardware, and like it's not a coherent plan. And like, it's not like Sony is in some like amazing spot here. I talk about this a lot, where they have their own problems, where they are also limited by console sales, and they are not being, you know, expanding into as many areas as Xbox. We've seen that shift a little bit with these late PC releases, but like, it does seem like a different category, you know, Sony releasing PC games later than Sony releasing The Last of Us, God of War on Xbox. Like, that's as unthinkable as Microsoft releasing Halo on PlayStation, and yet here we are. Sony has its own things to deal with. Their live service plans are sort of falling apart, but this would just be a wild kind of moonshot for Xbox, and I think it destroys the argument of Game Pass. I think it damages the community they have built up for a long time. I think this is, you know, essentially a reversal, if not a straight up, you know, feeling like they lied to players about this generation and what they could get if they invested in Xbox and whatever for this generation, and trying to play it off, well, like, oh, well, you got it first on Game Pass, but like, here's, you know, all these games are going to be available on PlayStation also. So that may allow people to not spend $500 on an Xbox and not spend, I don't even know how much Game Pass is, $100+ a year on Game Pass to get these games, if you can just straight up buy the game you want on PlayStation for $70. I don't think this is a good plan. I don't know how many ways to say it. We will see how Xbox actually announces this. It feels like they got to say something really soon here, because things are getting away from them. But I am certainly curious to see how they package this. I think it's just going to be, you know, typical marketing bullshit of like, you know, we want so many players to experience Xbox that like we're expanding beyond the box, and we're reaching out to our new partner at Sony, and like, you know, we just want the industry as a whole to succeed and you lift everyone. Like, I would make a jerk off symbol if I didn't think it would get screen capped. We'll see. I expect something, you know, more substantive to be announced soon, given everything that's happened. But I don't know. Feel free to say in the comments if you think this is good or bad. I know some people think it's perfectly fine and everyone's overreacting, but I think if you really think about this, it's sort of crazy. So we'll see. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.